So unrelated, I went to the concert on Saturday night that I told you I was going to. My brother bailed like a day beforehand. And he's like, why don't you just ask your friends or like if anybody else can go? No one ended up going. I went to a concert by myself, which was an interesting like experience in itself. It was really awkward. I actually ended up leaving half an hour early because I was like in the pit and I was tired of people bumping into me. So
God, I'm too old for the pit. I was too old when I was 20.
Anyway, I ended up going to the bar in Cranberry to meet up with the girl who I've been dating and her roommate. So I picked up one of my
What's
friends.
her name?
Her name is Bailey.
Nice.
Hi, Bailey. I'm Derek.
So I picked up one of my close friends. He's also a writer, and I went to college with him. He lives in Wexford, and we go to Sensi's out in Cranberry. And I walk in, and her and her roommate are sitting at a table in the bar, and two guys are already talking to them. So I'm already like, what's happening here? So I like slowly walk up towards them, and she looks at me. She's like, come here. Like, so I go there, and the two guys that were talking to them, she like interrupts. She's like, hi, this is Brendan. And they both give me a handshake. The one is like, hi, I'm Mike. And the other's like, hi, I'm Jordan. And one of them goes, get it? Mike Jordan. And they were so excited that their names combined to make Michael Jordan. And not only did they say this to me, but they used it as like a pickup line to her. And she's like, I get it. I get it. Like, you pre-planned that? Is that like a plan you use to go into the bar and be like, yeah, our names combined to be a famous basketball player. Not as good as LeBron, but
I saw it. I lead a boring life, so.
As you walked in, I was telling Derek that my roommate, who's 19, my other roommate's my age, he has his own tattoo gun. And last night I walk in, getting home from work, and he's giving himself tattoos. And they're permanent. It's like an actual tattoo gun. And I went in and I'm laughing because I think it's funny that he's like, he put an R on his right thigh and an L on his left thigh and a line going down from the L and a line going up from the R. And I was like, Chris, like, what does that mean? And he's like, I don't know. I just put a line on this here, so I had to even it out and put a line here too. But I look over and I have this measuring cup that I use, like measure out foods, like coffee, cottage cheese. Yeah, but I use it. Like I use it every day. I've used it every day for like the past year. And I look and he picks it up and he has isopropyl alcohol and the needles that he's tattooing himself with in it. I said, Chris, I was like, really, man? Like, no. Like, and he goes, do you use this? I said, yes. He goes, I'll get you new. I said, you got to ask me before you do things like this. Because like I've told you guys, I have to be kind of like the dad in this like
God help us.
roommate partnership.
I'm gonna take the positive spin of this. Like I said in the office the other night, is like I'm excited for this for Brendan as like his growing up that he has to do now to like figure out some more of the adulthood things that you eventually have to figure out, that all of us have to eventually figure out. Yeah. So like this is gonna force you into that space, and I'm like I want to see what the mature Brendan looks like in a year and a half dealing with this.
So you have a roommate that has a tattoo gun.
Yes.
Okay, you better watch coming back to your apartment. You're gonna wake up with a tattoo of Mickey Mouse.
Hey, Mickey Mouse ain't that bad. There could be a lot worse.
He's just giving himself these like tiny tattoos, and my friends are like, if you lose the turkey bowl, you're getting a tattoo from Chris. Not a chance. There's a reason like I haven't gotten tattoos yet because to get a tattoo would have to mean something to me. Like I feel like I'd regret it like a week later. I'd be like, that's on me the rest of forever. And there's no way I'm letting a 19-year-old tattoo me.
There was a conversation with that in this dynasty league that I'm in of like, okay, what's the punishment for finishing in last place? And someone brought up like, and it's not like this has been done in many leagues, like the tattoo punishment. And I was like, no way. I'm flat. Cause one of the people was like, it's gotta be visible. And I was like, the heck it's not. I was like, one, I'm not spending that money. If the entire league wants to drop money to pay for my next tattoo, that's fine. And then I'm going to get something that I want. But two, if we're going to do this, it's going to be out and visible, and I don't want it there. If I'm out of this league.
If you plan on coming over in the fall to watch some football games in the backyard,
I will.
You can tell your league mates that my roommate has a tattoo gun.
I don't know if a single one of them is going to listen to this episode of the podcast, and so I am pretty confident this will not get to
this one's not going on social media.
No. Does Derek have a tattoo?
Probably have more.
Or have you ever wanted a tattoo?
No, I have never had the idea or want to get a tattoo.
What's a teardrop under his eye?
For every time the Steelers hurt him in his life. Okay, so like legitimate question and no judgment here. Has there ever been something? There's a generational divide here too, because like I know my parents did not exactly like the fact that I got a tattoo. My brother got a piercing for a little bit. He's got tattoos. It wasn't something that they were a big fan of. But was there ever something that that you wanted to do, whether a piercing or tattoo or something that was a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Risque is not the word that I'm looking for, but rebellious, I guess, that at one point you thought about doing and just never pulled the trigger on?
I'm a very close to the vest guy. No, I'm just about the least risk-taking guy you're ever going to meet. I'm very boring, but that's the way I like it. And I was lucky enough to find a woman who, for some reason, found that okay, and she vowed to spend the rest of her life with me. So I feel like I'm pretty lucky in that respect because I am very boring.
I had excitement to his life.
I have actually thought about skydiving, not like I was on the verge of doing it, but I think that would be because that obviously there's a chance that your parachute doesn't open up and you fall to your death, but at least you come away with it without a tattoo on your body. I'm not a tattoo guy.
Splat on the cement.
I find there's people that get tattoos that, like Mike Tyson, all over his face. I don't understand that, but there's people that get tattoos of like the dates that their parents were born and died. There's they get initials of their kids tattooed on them. Obviously, those are meaningful. But my son's birthday is March 8th, 2015. I'll never forget that. I don't need to get it tattooed on my arm to remember it. I don't.
I'm gonna get I'm gonna get Rambo in a Pirates jersey on my arm. Use that as a graphic now.
There you go.
Today's episode is sponsored by Butler County Chamber of Commerce, Sprinkles Neighborhood Market, Robert Stevens Custom Jewelers, R.W. McDonald & Sons Incorporated. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting Eye on Sports.
Welcome to the latest edition of Alter Eagle's Eye on Sports, our podcast show being taped here on August 27th. We have to open up the show here. Well, first I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Butler Eagle Sports Writer Derek Pida. I'm joined by Eagle Sports Writer Brendan Howe and Eagle Sports Editor Jake Adams. And each week we're coming up with topics, trying to figure out what to talk about, and the lead this week is actually very easy. Mars football had a game scheduled Friday down in Florida against Boone, a team from outside of Orlando. It got postponed till Saturday morning because of bad weather, and when they played, Mars junior receiver Gabe Hein tallied over 300 receiving yards, and Luke Goodworth threw for 5 touchdowns. Mars won the game 47-35. I think it surprised a few people because, football around here is really good. Mars is really good, but a lot of times when you think Florida, some of the same thoughts that go through your mind when you think about football from Texas. You just think of these really good teams down that way. Even if they have like a 500 record, you're thinking to yourself, they're going up against other teams from the same state. They're really good. I personally picked Mars to lose that game. I know, Brendan, you picked them to win, and they did. What are your impressions, not only of Mars opening the season with a very impressive victory, but the effort turned in Mars's passing game, particularly Gabe Hines, 330 receiving yards?
So I got to go out to talk to Gabe Hein, Eric Kasparovich, and Luke Goodworth yesterday. The correct number there.
For what did you do that for?
What do you mean?
What were you talking to them for, Brennan? Take people behind the scenes a little bit.
For a feature that will be in this week's Butler Eagle at some point. I should have mentioned that. I'm sorry. But Gabe was really honest with me. He told me that one of those long touchdowns, one of those 80-plus yard touchdowns, was not his. So he ended up with 258 yards, he told me, and that other touchdown was Mason Childress's. Really honest for a high school kid. He could have taken that and been like, yeah, I had 330 yards. Like, I did really, really well. And I joked to him. I was like, just 258. Come on, man. But something that stuck out to me, talking to him and talking to Goodworth, was the quarterback told me that they both told me, actually, that they didn't change coverage. Boone didn't at all. They ran the same coverage the entire game as they're getting torched by a passing offense, which maybe that's just like a coaching mistake, a coaching mishap. Like, I don't know how you don't change the coverage when you're getting beat for 80-yard touchdowns up and across the board.
At least put a shadow on the guy. Yeah. Something, anything.
But they said if they're to keep that same level of success on offense this week, Gabe Hein surprisingly will have to be less of a piece there. They'll have to get some other people involved against a really good Bethel Park team. So I'm excited to cover that game.
It was interesting. Like I pulled up the Hudl video today, getting ready for the show, and yeah, like that was the first thing I noticed too. Was like after a couple plays of these, like every single time it's in zone. Either like they just happened to beat him on zone all the time, or they ran this the entire game and didn't make any adjustments. And he kept finding soft spots in that zone. And the speed that he then showed beating safeties that were 5 yards upfield of him that he probably should, like that the normal player wouldn't beat, was kind of alarming. That's one of his big touchdowns, was that he broke by a safety that was 5-10 yards upfield, should have been able to cut him off and couldn't. He just flew. I want to see what Bethel Park, which we think has a stronger defensive secondary, at least from what we saw last week against Seneca Valley, can do in terms of like, so you got to bracket coverage this guy, which is going to open up other guys to potentially get open or to get some receptions, which like Goodworth did spread the ball around. Looking at the box score, like he made some plays to other guys, got some other guys some points in the end zone. But man, if this is what he's going to do to start his junior year, oh boy, we're like, people are in trouble.
I looked back. I knew Gabe Hein had a really good year last year until he got injured. He actually ended up missing 7 of Mars's 13 games last year.
I was going to say, didn't he still put up 1,000 yards?
774 yards. But, so he was averaging well over 100 yards per game, and Mars lost in the Whitfield semifinals to Aliquippa. They lose that game. I believe the final score is 47-24. But at the beginning of the game, the game was obviously close at the start. I mean, Mars scored the first touchdown and go up 7-0, and we'll never know exactly how that game turns out if Gabe Hein would have been able to play in that game. But I did pull up one stat that kind of puts this in perspective. Brendan, you said the total for Hein was actually 258 yards. Okay. Still, obviously not 330, but still very impressive. Last year's Whitfield leader in receiving yards, and this includes the playoffs, was a kid from Western Beaver, Dorian McGee. He ended the season with 1,199 yards. And Gabe Hein at 258 is already a fifth of the way there after just one game.
Do we think he gets to that number this year?
If he stays healthy, I do. If he stays healthy.
I mean, we got to assume he's not going to have 200-yard games too often this season, even against some of the – he will. They're playing a tough non-conference schedule from what I can tell. So there's probably going to be some easier games later in the season, but like you're still not going to get 200 a game or maybe even again this year.
Right. I mean, who knows how the season's going to play out, but I would predict that Mars is going to get decently far in the playoffs. So if he stays healthy, that's 2 or 3 more games worth of yards. I think he surpasses 1,200, and I think as long as he stays healthy, I think he's going to lead the Whitfield in receiving this year. I mean, this is a kid who came in as a freshman and put up, I think it was 550, 600 yards as a freshman. He's only a junior. That's the crazy thing. He still has another full year to go after this year. So, obviously, Mars, I don't know if they're a little better than I thought they were, or if this Boone team, who knows? I mean, I think, Jake, you said they were like 500 last year. But still, when you think Florida, you're thinking, okay, a team from Florida that's 500, they're going up against other teams from Florida every single week. So 500 might not be it could still be a pretty talented team.
And they got College Town on that roster from what I saw too.
Yeah.
And what we would have thought with a lightning delay, not being able to play that night, was that it would kind of take away from the comfortability of being down there. You take a flight down and you're in an unfamiliar place, thousands of miles from home. Goodworth and Hein told me it felt like a JV game, and they played JV together before both of them started playing varsity, and that added to the comfortability. They went out and they're like, this is like a JV game, and obviously they made the other team look like it was JV.
Brendan, I want to throw off script here. I want to throw a question to you. If we were starting a fantasy draft here of Butler County athletes, Butler County football players, are you taking Hunter Shear or Gabe Hein number 1 overall? Especially after what we just saw this past week.
Karn City had 17 players carry the ball on Friday night. So a big part of fantasy is you want the ball in your players' hands a lot. So with that, I'd go with Gabe Hein because Karn City's going to share the ball. 17 kids rushing in one game. That took me forever to do the stats. It took me longer to do the stats for that story than it did to write the story. So
I mean, you got to think that 17 guys are going to get the carry every single game here. But still, your point, yeah.
I'm sure Derek can attest. It's probably at least 5, 6, 7 ball carries a game for Karn City. They like to share.
No, last week they gave the ball to how many guys? Did you say 14?
17.
17. Okay, they also beat Montauk 59-0.
Yeah.
In close games. It's obviously not going to be that many, but even in close games, they will give the ball to 6 or 7 guys, with each guy getting like 3 or 4 carries. So I want to throw one thing out. You brought up the fantasy thing. I know this might not be a popular pick because of the way they got handled last week. I would still pick Colt Sprinkle from Knock. I think he's going to have a big season. He's mobile. Last year at Armstrong, he threw for 10 touchdowns and over 700, actually 11 touchdowns and over 700 yards in just 5 games before he got hurt. I think he's going to have a big year. I think last week is basically an anomaly.
So assuming like a traditional fantasy football structure, 4 to 6 points for a touchdown for quarterbacks, passing yards, rushing yards, receiving yards, and everything, would you take Sprinkle number 1 overall, or would you take him after Hein and or Shearer? Because I like him as an early pick. You make a good point there. I'm just curious where you'd rank him.
That's tough. I'm going to put him number 1 overall. And the only reason I'm also thinking about Luke Goodworth, the guy throwing those passes to Gabe Hein. I think Colt Sprinkle's a little bit more mobile than Luke Goodworth. Luke Goodworth has a great arm, and I'm not saying he can't gain yards on the ground, but if they both stay healthy, I think Sprinkle's going to end this year with a lot more rushing yards, and by virtue of that, more chances to score on the ground than Goodworth. But Goodworth's he's got a golden arm. I mean, you've
the
seen
zip on
him play.
his passes is crazy.
He's very good, but just in terms of fantasy, I'm going to go with a quarterback that can throw the ball and is a very dominant threat to actually run the ball as well. So I'd go with Colt.
Something I've noticed about Goodworth's throwing motion too, like I was out taking pictures of him in the preseason yesterday, is when he cocks his arm back, he points the front, like the ball on the side of his thumb at the receiver, and as he throws, his arm twists. Like it's weird seeing a quarterback when you're like they're cocking back like that.
Isn't that the inverted W for a pitcher? Isn't that what that's called? Because when you face the baseball back towards center field, like that's a motion that some people have feared as like an elbow issue. I'm not saying that it is for football, but like I remember something like that being brought up at one point.
I've never heard of that, but that's like I've never seen someone throw a ball like that. It's always the ball.
You said Goodworth?
Yeah.
I didn't notice it. I covered him a couple of times last year. I never noticed that. I just basically focused on the result of his passes, which were usually really good.
Yeah. It's that video, man. If you guys want to go watch that, I recommend it. That was a clinic on that video. Granted, Hudl videos are meant to make all the players look good. It's part of the recruiting process and everything, but that was an impressive set of highlights that I saw there.
I don't think there's any Hudl tape out there of me, so
we should dig that up. We should find it.
We're going to move on. Each week we try to focus on a few things outside of high school football, and one of our discussion topics this week is going to be Karn City Girls Soccer. They have won 25 District 9 titles in 29 years. Now, when I got here, Joe Mashenko was the coach of Karn City Girls Soccer, and I know he had been coach for a few years leading up to that. And then in 2006, Lisa Castiglione took over. She coached the team for about 10 years, and now Tracy Daly, who is still there, she took over after that. And each coach has basically been able to keep this very impressive string of district titles going. There's only 4 years in the last quarter century that they have not won. Actually, 4 out of 25 that they have not won. That's just incredible for me. It's a great, impressive streak, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this remarkable run of success, Brendan. You've covered Karn City Girls a few times. What sticks out about the program, and what do you think is the biggest contributor to this type of incredible success within their own district?
Well, Karn City is one of those teams, kind of like Mars Girls Soccer, where every game you go to, that they have a chance to win, or they're favored to win. So that's always interesting, knowing that you're going to watch a good game, or usually. So with that, even in my 3 years here, I think they've won the District 9 championship every year. Is that correct?
I believe they lost in 21. I think they lost.
So that'd be my first year here, but yeah, they're definitely a program where you go out to a game and you know that they have a really, really good chance to win.
I'm curious. A couple questions to get to know this a little bit better. Like, one, is there like a second team that's always finishing like runner up to them that is always the bridesmaid, never the bride within District 9? It's just it's a 2-horse race all the time, but Karn City just continues to come away with it. And two, I'm curious what the fan base must be like with that, with a consistent dynasty. That, like, is there a strong contingent out there at games when you guys are covering them?
Yeah, they got a very faithful following, and regarding the teams finishing second, it's kind of gone back and forth because a few years ago, Karn City was Double-A. The last time they lost or didn't win the District 9 title, they lost to Clearfield, and they came back the next year and beat Clearfield. Last year, they dropped down to Single A, and they beat Brockway. So Brockway's finished second a number of times. Elk County Catholic, back in the day, we're talking 15, 20 years ago, there was a string of 5, 6, 7 straight years where there was like a 5-year stretch where Karn City would play Elk County Catholic, and Karn City won all those games. I don't think Elk County Catholic has ever beaten Karn City. That's like you talk about a team being kind of a thorn in your side. I don't think Elk County Catholic, and they've had a really good girls soccer program for a while, for a long time. They've never beaten Karn City. So there's a host of teams that have fallen victim to the Karn City Gremlins girls soccer team when it comes to reaching the District 9 final and losing to the Gremlins. But this year in particular, I know they've got a strong team back. They got a 3-year starter in goal in Savannah Prescott. They got Hannah Daly, who is Tracy, the head coach's daughter. They have Trinity McFarland, who's a shutdown defender. Ava Kamensky, who's also another very good defender. They got Phoebe Brandon, who came onto the scene last year as a freshman and scored 20 goals, and she was only a freshman. So don't be surprised if we're talking about Karn City playing for and possibly winning another District 9 title in November here, and that would be if they win 26 titles in 30 years, which is that's a dynasty. That is a true dynasty. I mean, you hear about the Patriots when they won 3 out of 4 years in the early 2000s, and people are like, okay, that's a dynasty. Even the Steelers in the 70s, they won 4 titles in 6 years, which is great. But 26 in 30 years, 26 titles, which is what it would be if they win this year.
Is there another word beyond dynasty? What is bigger
I don't know.
than
I mean,
dynasty?
you talk about the Chinese dynasties in history; those things lasted for thousands of years. I don't know if there is a bigger word than dynasty.
What would you call it, Brendan?
Let me Google some synonyms here.
While he's doing his research, I want to point out they've obviously had Karn City girls soccer's had great years, winning District 9 titles, but the kind of the crown jewel for that program was in 2015 when they not only won a D9 title, they beat 2 Whitfield teams in the first 2 rounds of the state playoffs. They beat Shadyside Academy and Greensburg Central Catholic, and they went to the state semifinal before finally falling. That's as far as I know that Karn City has ever gotten in the state playoffs. One thing I want to throw out there is back when this streak started in the mid-'90s, Karn City got to the – Brendan, you'll get a kick out of this because you know the difference in size of these schools. Karn City went to the state playoffs. I think it was back in '96. You know who they played in the state playoffs? Seneca Valley. Because back then there was only one class for girls soccer in the entire state.
That's crazy.
Karn City played Seneca Valley.
I have a word here. It's better than dynasty. Sovereignty.
Ooh, I like that.
It's supreme power or authority.
I like that. Karn City's a sovereignty right now.
Okay. Regime. How about that? Monopoly. How about Monopoly? They own District 9.
No one else plays soccer in District 9.
Just don't be there. There you go. But we're looking for a big season at Karn City girls soccer, and I think they got the players to do it this year. And I definitely think they can add to that tradition of dominance within their own district and see if they can even make a run in the state playoffs.
We get excited about synonyms over here. At least I do.
Hey, this is
we're writers. We're writers.
Exactly. Also, it's good to introduce people to different words. I mean, regime we know, but there's some sovereignty I would not have thought of. I would not have thought of that for this little seminar, this class that we just did.
And now time for Beyond Butler, the segment of the show where we talk about sports outside of Butler County, usually collegiately or professionally. This week I wanted to talk about, I was watching the college football opener. I was in Ireland this year. I think the past 3 years it has been actually. Georgia Tech beat Florida State, but that's not what stuck out to me the most. At the start of the show or at the start of the broadcast, they mentioned that it is some superlative for this season of college football that's different than all the others. And it kind of made me sad a little bit. We know that the Pac-12 kind of dissolved, and some teams went to the Big Ten, some teams went to the Big 12. I think money is ruining college football. I used to be excited to see the rivalries, like rivalry week. The last week of a season was always the best week to look forward to. And the conference realignment and the way that money has ruined the sport, is what I'm saying, has really kind of taken away from the fun of college football. Obviously, I'm still going to watch every Saturday, be excited to watch football, but it is a little different. So I just wanted to hear Derek and Jake's thoughts on how college football has changed in the past few years.
I think, I hate to bring up a history lesson here, but any sport that goes professional, and for baseball, football, you can trace it all back to a certain time. I'm going to go back to 1892. That was the year that Pudge Heffelfinger,
I love that name.
Pudge Heffelfinger took money to play in a football game. That's basically where football became professional. Mm-hmm. From that point on, each generation is going to try to raise the bar as far as money goes. Not just the amount of money that players are making, but the amount of money that, at first it was radio stations and TV stations. Each generation is going to push the bar further. So I know you probably know this. We all know this, but I do think we're having this discussion that has to be mentioned. It's never going backwards. Can you agree with that?
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Back in the mid-'60s when Joe Namath signed a $400,000 contract with the New York Jets, everybody's like, $400,000. Now that's nothing.
It's not even like the 10th highest paid quarterback in the NFL.
So we think the contracts now for players and the deals that these conferences are signing with TV networks, we think they're outrageous now. Just wait until my son's 9 years old. When he's 30, they're going to be numbers that even now, when we're looking at the numbers that are outrageous now, 25, 30 years from now, they're going to be completely off the board. It's never going backwards, and I think a lot of it comes down to, for me, what the sport was like when I was a kid. When I was a kid, the money was still outrageous for that time. But I grew up with the Rose Bowl was, the granddaddy of them all. Now it's it can be involved in the playoff. But back when I was a kid, it was a big game just standing on its own. And a lot of times it did affect the national title picture, because this is back when they voted on the national title. They didn't actually play a game. But I loved watching the Rose Bowl. I always kind of got down. It was kind of a depressing, New Year's Eve is over with. That party the night before is over with. You're going back to school in a couple days, but the Rose Bowl was always something that I look forward to.
Wisconsin,
UCLA. I remember watching one year. It was, I believe, Iowa and USC. It was Big Ten versus Big Pac-10. That's what it was, and it was a game you looked forward to.
And now it's a conference matchup in the Big Ten: USC, Ohio State, and Oregon, Ohio State.
Penn State and USC are now in the same conference. What is going on here?
So this is I'm the contrarian in this. I feel, and that's fine. To me, especially at the Power 5 level, Power 4, the high D1 level, these kids are treated like employees, and sometimes very cruel. And I'm not saying that like coaching isn't difficult and they can't be like tough on their players and whatnot, but some of these coaches can be cruel, and these kids are subjected to things that normal 18 and 19-year-olds aren't, and also 18 and 19-year-olds in any other walk of life can go and get a part-time job at wherever to subsidize their college income, if they get any scholarships, if they get any grants to pay for school and everything like that. And we've long denied that of football players and all athletes in general. I'm very glad that this is a new era here where these kids can get paid because they are working borderline full-time jobs. The expectations of them, especially at these levels, is they have to, like, football is number one. Like, let's not delude ourselves here. These kids are not going to Florida State to study business, many of them. A lot of them are trying to prepare for the NFL, or they were brought here because they were good at football. FSU was not interested in them because of their brain, and that's like a cruel reality here, but that's what it is. The coach is not sitting there going, I want this kid on my team because he's going to be a future rocket scientist. They don't give a crap about most of these players' future careers. They give a crap about, can this guy help me win a football game? So if it's going to be like that, these kids need to get paid like that. And I'm okay with this. And also I sit there and go, the college football game continues to get better. Like in terms of the quality of the product on the field, we can't deny it. Like these kids are in better shape. They are better trained. Like the games are more entertaining. They're more high scoring than they were any generation before. It's similar to what you were saying before about this stuff never goes back. The game continues to evolve and get better. So like the product itself is more and more entertaining, and it's only going to continue to get better and better as these guys are better trained and better schemes come out and yada, yada, yada.
I want to kind of extend on your idea there, or your thought that a lot of players at colleges such as Florida State, and there's obviously a lot of others, a large portion of the players are brought in there because of what they can do for the football team, not because of their brains. But when it comes to the classroom,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are you okay with, you see it there's where the players have other students taking tests for them?
I'm not saying that the system is right. I'm just saying, like, we can't pretend these kids are student athletes, especially for like these high major programs. They're not being brought in for the student side of it. It's just the NCAA trying to protect itself and say, no, these kids are going to class. They're brought here to be athletes.
At this point, a lot of the kids are taking online classes too. Like
Yeah.
it's at the point where they don't even go to classes.
Well, and some of that's
So-
because of just straight up like safety issues. Like for them to go into a classroom, if you are Archie Manning, or Arch Manning, sorry, that's dangerous in some cases. Like that's a super celebrity in a college campus. Like you don't necessarily want him distracted. I'm not saying dangerous like he's going to get severely harmed, but just like that's a distraction in a classroom. I understand why some athlete, like Angel Reese, was pulled out of class. I think at one point a year and a half ago during LSU's first championship run, I think 2 years ago. Like this is normal for athletes just to be kind of separated from that because it just becomes too much of a distraction. But I think the system is broken, and I could go for like an hour on like different things that you could potentially do to change it, but that's a whole
Do you
long
watch
episode.
college football this fall and be like, can you enjoy it without thinking, this is how it used to be?
One, for me, like I was never a huge college football fan. Like I think this was part of the rebellion of like so many people around me were Penn State fans. And it's like I don't want to root for Penn State, but I don't want to root for anyone else because there's really not anyone.
Come on down, Ohio State. Come on
I will
down.
not root for anyone in the Big Ten, except maybe Northwestern for fun.
They don't even have a stadium right now.
I know. To me, it's change is inevitable. Like the NFL used to have 6 teams per conference make the playoffs. Now it's 7. Now only 1 team gets the bye. Now teams throw the ball way more. And MLB, there used to be 4 teams that made the playoffs when I was a kid. Now that's also 7. The Phillies wouldn't have made that World Series run 2 years ago if not for the fact that there was an extended wild card. Like this is just change. Like I'm going to enjoy the product for it is. I'm going to enjoy the teams that I root for, the players that I root for who or what they are or how I might relate to them or what I like about them. I need to accept that the sports like PIAA has changed things a million times here. And like, to me, when they went from 4 to 6 classifications in football, like there was a whole lot of griping about it. Like, I get it. Yeah. At the playoff level, like those first round games can be even more of a blowout than they were before, but they were still blowouts in 4 classifications in the first round of state playoffs. Like that's just a part of the process. And to me, it's like, why would I spend all of my energy griping about what is now no longer? And instead I need to think about what is going on right now? What am I going to enjoy? Or when it's as a reporter, how do I cover this now? And to me, why, like I bemoan change just like anyone else, but sometimes to me, it's like, especially for sports, it's like, this is a game, man. Like I just got to enjoy it.
As long as money's involved, there's always going to be more people as the years go on with their hands out, and they want more than the last generation. That's what it's never going backwards. The great thing about if you like the way sports used to be played, college, pro, at any level, there's a thing called YouTube. There's a thing called YouTube. I just watched a Steeler game from 1984 the other day. You should check it out. It's Mark Malone whizzing passes downfield.
This is how Brendan gets his old school kick if he wants it. He can just play the wing T offense in NCAA football.
There we go. Yeah.
Coming up with, I got to find a way to redeem myself. I changed the order a little bit here. Last week, the question was asked about 3 minutes before I had to give you an answer. This time, we're asking it earlier in the show, and I'll try to come up with a respectable answer by the end of the show. But I got a little bit more time to think about it, so here we go. Go ahead, Brendan.
So this might be a really easy one for you, or it might be a really hard one. I don't know your knowledge here. So on the topic of money, this kind of ties in. The Pittsburgh Pirates once had the highest paid player in professional baseball. Who was he?
Okay, I will answer. I will give you my answer later in the show. We're going to get on to something that actually is a little bit more competitive than watching me miss a trivia question here.
Competitive?
No.
I'm up 2 already.
Don't you start.
This week's picks, we're going to go through a few games here and actually give some analysis and a final score that we predict. And then the last few games, we're just going to give a final score. But we've all done our due diligence with the picks here as far as looking over the internet and doing some research. So first game is Brashear at Butler. Butler coming off a week 1 loss to they lost last week to Shaler. A Whitfield opponent this week. They got a City League opponent. And Brennan, your alma mater, do they get off the schneid here and get their first win of 2024?
They were competitive the other night against Shaler. I think what I heard is that it came down to kind of time management, a few smaller things. That's against a fellow 6A school, or I think Shaler's 5A now. They used to be 6A when I was in school. But still, a team that is around the same size as Butler. Brashear, much smaller school. It's a City League school. I think Butler moves to 500 this week with a 28-14 win.
Jake?
Brashear got popped last week, 44-0, I believe was the score. Butler's won the last 2 meetings by 2+ scores. I think 13 was the lowest last year or 2 years ago. I think Butler showed a little bit more offensive life in that second half. It would have been nicer for them. Obviously, they started out hotter in the beginning, but I think there's more offensive firepower there. Butler should win this one 35-13.
Okay, last week, Butler in defeat had a 100-yard rusher in Jacob Collinger and a 100-yard receiver in Preston Simcoe. Just cut out the mistakes. If they can do that earlier in the game, I think they'll be good. That should be part of the recipe for success for them. This week, I got the Golden Tornado winning at home 24-20. Karn City at Brookville. Jake, am I covering this game, by the way?
Yes.
Okay. I put down for it. I just didn't know for sure. I will be in Brookville for this game. Karn City coming off a 59-0 win over Montauk, going up to Brookville, which is a rematch of last year's District 9 semifinal game, won by Brookville 42-41, even though Karn City played the entire game without a quarterback. Brendan, who do you go with here?
Brookville beat Bradford last week, if I'm correct.
They did.
Ho-hum. Karn City really showed something, and just standing on the sidelines covering that game, like I wrote in the newsletter that went out, the physicality that team brings is just ridiculous. The hits made me question how I ever played football. So I'm going to go Karn City here. They lost last year, but that running game and Hunter Scher, he's not an easy kid to take down. So I'm going to go Karn City winning this one close, 21-19.
Sorry, I don't want to mix you up with Brendan. Jake.
He wishes.
Only for your record last week. I'm going Brookville 44-35. I'm not confident in this pick at all. I think it's been tough sledding for Casey in this matchup the last few years. I think they've lost 6 straight, if that's right, 5 straight, something like that. But I could be very wrong in this pick. I don't think either team was particularly tested last week from what I understand about the area. Obviously, Karn City ran away from Montauk within the first couple drives of the game. So I'm not sure. I think there's enough on Brookville's offense returning that they should be able to win this game, but this is a coin flip to me.
Okay. They do have a lot returning on offense. 2 guys that are not returning, are not back on this year's team because of graduation. Quarterback, defensive back Charlie Krug, who had a monster year last year. Wide receiver, defensive back Jack Pete, who was a star on the track team. Came out for football just to kind of see what he could do, and he turned in an incredible year. And last year, Brookville actually beat Karn City twice, once in the regular season, once in the playoffs, and those 2 guys played incredible games, had big roles in both games. I'm not saying, obviously, they have kids that are replacing them. They got a lot of talent on that team, but I like Karn City to go up there and use that running game to keep the Brookville offense off the field as much as possible. Karn City 28-21.
Derek, am I correct? Is that the game that decided the standings last year?
No,
it was getting towards that point, I think.
No. Mars and Aliquippa, I believe. North Catholic at Knock. 2 Butler County teams going at it. 2 Butler County teams that are coming off losses last week. North Catholic lost to Seton LaSalle. Knock lost to Kiski area. Which team gets in the win column? Jake, we're going to go to you first on this one.
Again, I'm really not sure about this one. I'm going North Catholic 28-24. Neither offense was particularly good last week, but they also faced some quality opponents, so I get where some of those struggles came from. I think scoring is going to be a little bit easier. Neither one of these teams is running against a defense that is particularly as strong as they did a week ago. I could see this going either way, though. I'm just going to say, because we have to make a pick, North Catholic 28-24.
Brendan.
So something in the preseason that stuck out to me, I overheard not Coach Timberchet talking to Slippery Rock coach Larry Wenders about the numbers that he has on his team this year. And Knock is kind of lacking. They have, I think, 35 kids, and they're playing up a classification from last year. So North Catholic is used to that classification. They have some talent, and Knock has some things to figure out after only scoring 7 points last week. So I think they do sort of get the offense going, not in terms of points, but they get the yards rolling there. I think North Catholic wins this one 22-14.
Well, if Knock wins, I'm going to be on an island getting it right because I'm actually going with the Knights. I think they do have Colt Sprankle, even though he didn't play at Knock last year. We know what he's capable of from his half of a year at Armstrong in 2023. Caden Spencer and Cody Mullen at skill positions, giving Colt Sprankle people to throw to. Wyatt Foster anchoring that line. I think the Knights have more known commodities on offense. And as you said, Brendan, they just moved up a classification this year. But I do think they're going to find a way to win this one at home, beating North Catholic 21-16. All right, Brendan, this is the big one for you. This is a game you're covering, and it's a game that I'm predicting to be the game of the week. Bethel Park, who I covered last week against Seneca Valley, playing that Mars team, back with their suntans from Florida, back after a 5-touchdown passing effort from Luke Goodworth, 200-plus yards from Gabe Hein. Bethel Park at Mars, you'll be in Planet Country. Who do you like?
I'm not going to say the exact quote that I heard from Eric Kasparovich at the team's practice yesterday, but he seems pretty confident in his offense. He said as long as the gist of it, he said as long as they perform the way they did last week against Boone, which that 47 points is usually a win when it comes to the gridiron.
Yeah, if you play like that again, I think you're good.
I don't think they get to 47 points this time, but I do think this is somewhat of a close one. They allowed over 30 points last week. Mars wins this one, moves to 2-0, 35-33.
Jake.
Interesting. We are like nearly in lockstep on that. I'm going Mars 38-36 this time. I underestimated the Planets last week. I will admit that. They put on a clinic surrounded by palm trees and sun in the morning. That was a gorgeous backdrop to that stadium. Bethel Park's got college talent on this roster, and they dismantled Seneca Valley a week ago. But I'm going to make the homer pick here. I think Mars is flying high right now. That is a big win to come off of. You're returning home. I think that momentum carries.
You mentioned that you underestimated Mars last week. So did I. I also underestimated Bethel Park. I picked them to lose to Seneca Valley, and they beat Seneca Valley by 36 points. They have a very talented quarterback, Bethel Park does, in Tanner Pfeiffer, 3-year starter. But I think the fact that they're going up against Mars and that apparently vaunted passing attack with Luke Goodworth and Gabe Hein and company, I think Bethel Park's going to look to keep the ball on the ground. Last week, David Dennison, Javon Moore, 2 of their running backs, combined for almost 200 yards. If you don't want the other team's offense on the field, you keep the ball. I think Bethel Park's going to do that enough. I don't think they're going to shut Mars down by any stretch, but I think their running game is going to keep the Mars offense on the field enough to win 29-26 Blackhawks. All right, now we go back to Seneca Valley, who's coming off obviously a subpar effort against Bethel Park last week. Now they're going on the road down the North Hills. First-year starting quarterback, Andrew Lobig, struggled last week, 2 pick sixes. He did come back later in the game to rush for a touchdown and pass for a touchdown, but does he do enough? Does Seneca Valley do enough to get a win here, Brendan, down in Westview?
I don't think so. Martirelli Stadium is honestly probably my favorite stadium around here, just the way that stadium's set up. I'm sure you've covered a game there, right, Derek?
Oh, yeah, many.
Yeah, the way it's set up is it's like built on the side of a hill, and then it's like in a valley. So
interesting.
It's like an arena in itself. But anyways, Seneca Valley is not going to have a fun time in that venue. They lose 44-21.
Jake.
I didn't like what I saw reading your recap last week just from Seneca Valley. I can't imagine you liked watching that any more than I liked reading that. They turned the ball over way too much. I think North Hills is going to be able to snap a 4-game skid in this series and win this one 28-21.
Okay. Lobig I think he's going to have a decent year, but he is he's a smaller kid. He's like 5'7", 5'8". I think early in the year here, especially after last week's performance, Seneca Valley is looking to take some pressure off of him, and the way to do that is to get their ground game going. 2 guys for Seneca Valley that can do that: Caden Parker, Chase Mazanik. I think they're going to put the focus on running the ball. They're certainly not going to run it down North Hills' throats. Their coaches, they're the defensive-minded team. They always seem to have a good defense, but I think Seneca Valley's running game and their defense is looking to rebound this week too. They had a bad game last week against Bethel Park. I think Seneca Valley's defense and their running game is going to do enough to carry the Raiders to a 17-10 win at North Hills. Man, you guys, we're different on you and Brendan got together on your picks here. I'm telling you, because I'm like on an island on all these things.
You've been pretty contrarian.
If I'm gonna finish in second, I'd rather finish in
You're
second.
gonna fall behind, buddy.
Contrarian. Look that word up. Okay, we're going to these last games. We're just looking for a score here, guys. Freeport at Derry. I'm going with Freeport 31-15. Brennan?
Welcome back to Greens. I think Freeport's going to win 30-12.
Jake?
I'll go 28-20 Freeport.
Okay, Bradford at Montauk. Brendan?
Montauk struggled last week. They'll struggle again, 45-6. Bradford.
Jake?
31-14 Bradford.
Man, 27-22 Taw. You heard it here.
That's brave.
You heard it here. Ridgeway at Union AC Valley. Jake?
I think Union AC Valley gets this win. I'm not 100% confident. 28-21.
Just because my score is so close to yours, I'm going to go with my score now. I'm taking the Falcon Knights 27-21. Brendan?
Ridgeway 21-13.
Franklin, this is 2 Saturday games to finish out the schedule here. Franklin at Slippery Rock. Brendan?
Slippery Rock loses this one. Also, Franklin wins 35-14.
Jake?
Ooh, I'm going opposite here. Maybe this is naivety. 30-14 Slippery Rock I have.
I'm going 19-13. Unlike last week when the Rockets failed to get on the board, they will get on the board this week, but I got Franklin winning 19-13. Summit Academy. But one thing we have not talked about in this show is Summit Academy last week. What was it? A 17-game losing streak, I believe they beat. Mm-hmm. They beat Fraser last week. Now they're hosting New Brighton. Is it 2 in a row for the Knights, Brendan?
I've picked Summit Academy a lot, and they've usually let me down. Last week they didn't. I was excited to find out that they won. Unfortunately, they don't win 2 in a row. I think that New Brighton comes out in a close victory here, 17-14.
Jake?
I'll ride the hot hand. Summit Academy 34-10.
All right. I think this is going to be a good game, but I think New Brighton is going to have just enough to squeak by the Knights, who obviously have a lot of momentum after that win over Fraser. 28-18 New Brighton. That does it for the picks. We'll see how bad I do.
How bad are you going to do on this trivia question?
Dave Parker.
There you go.
That was easy.
Derek just made his own day right there.
1-1. The Cobra. Dave Parker.
Back to 500.
339 career home runs for Dave Parker, by the way.
For those to take people behind the scenes, Brendan last week was peacocking for a good chunk of that week. John Enriado shows up in the office on Friday night. He's like, John, guess what I did? I got Derek.
Easier said than done.
He can't shake his feathers because he has no feathers. So you can imagine what he was shaking, and I didn't want to see it for a second.
Should we do – this is after the show is done, obviously, but should we do – you didn't read the standings. You don't know what the standings are. Oh, is it going to be like a graphic? Okay.
Graphic.
We'll just
I see you Wikipediaing Bruce Smith over there. Why Bruce Smith?
You're not supposed to be looking at my screen. You ruined what I was going to do.
We got one.
Damn it! Now I have to come up with another question.
We got one segment left here.
I had a question for you guys from my podcast. It was a three-parter.
Shit.
You just answered it. Fuck my life.
Oh.
Okay.
All right. This
I'll
is
make
all
believe
cut
I don't
out.
know. I'm sorry. I was just like, damn. Like, why is she interested in Bruce Smith?
we gotta do the last segment here, so we need to pause for a second. Derek leads us in.
I'm sorry, Laura.
That's okay.
We good?
Yeah.
Dave Parker was at one point the highest paid player in Major League Baseball. Just in case people heard the answer, didn't hear the question. I got it right this week. I'm 1-1. Our memories of great individual efforts. You know, when I was coming up with the topics for this week's show, and I was thinking about Gabe Hein, got me thinking about, and this doesn't have to deal with just football. It can be any sport. I wanted to get, Brendan, we're going to go to you first on this. Great individual efforts that you saw while covering a game. It can be any sport. What do you got?
So we've talked in detail about me being a little bit partial to Freeport. And I'm sure Jake has kind of taken notice of how I like to write a little poetically every now and then. So I'm sure I'm sure Jake hasn't seen this yet. My lead to this story of the individual that had the great game was before he stood up to talk, Ben Lane sat on the 30-yard line with his legs spread out, leaning back on his hands. Whether taking in his surroundings after an important 35-13 section win over East Allegheny or resting for a moment, he deserved it. That night, Ben Lane was unstoppable. He was running kids over left and right, and up to that point, I never saw him get that physical. I'm talking like bowling kids over, scoring touchdowns.
Who were they playing here?
East Allegheny.
Okay.
He ran for 254 yards that night. And we talked post-game that he saw they were at the 45-yard line, and he wanted to get a 45 run to make it 300 yards. He didn't, but he had 3 touchdowns that night, 254 yards, and no one could tackle him. So that is the one that sticks out to me.
Ben Lane now playing at Slippery Rock University. There's some love for Ben Lane and Freeport. Jake, what do you got?
I'll be honest. I don't have like a particular game that I covered that stood out on football. There was a game that my staff covered. It was Cumberland Valley Central Dolphin in the District 3 Class 4A, when it was still 4A, championship game. And my Mid-Penn friends there, my Central Pennsylvania colleagues out there will remember this game and that rivalry. Those are two of the biggest teams in Mid-Penn. They face each other all the time in the playoffs and regular season. That game went to, I believe it was 7 overtimes. And high school football, obviously, in overtime, you started at 10 and you got 4 downs to try to score a touchdown or kick a field goal. They scored a touchdown on every single drive. So the score was like 56. I think they each had like 56 points at one point. It was like a 7 or 10-10 game at the end of regulation. And Central Dolphin lost the game simply because it's like we could kick extra points until the end of time, both of our teams. So we're just going to try to go for the win now, and got stuffed on the 2-point conversion and lost. It was a nuts game. We missed deadline because of it, but it was considered it was actually kind of considered a boring 7 overtime game because it was both teams running wing T. For me, like the biggest game that I remember covering outside of football was Carlisle Reading in the District 3 4A quarterfinals in boys basketball, and that one felt like a district championship game beforehand. Like those are the two best teams in District 3 going into the tournament. If like it was kind of unfortunate they were on the same side of the bracket, and the game played out like it should have been the district championship if you could have realigned everything. That was Lonnie Walker the fourth, who was went to Miami. He was drafted by the Spurs. He played for the Lakers. I think he's somewhere else now. I'm not 100% sure. He was a stud in high school, one of the best players that the state's ever seen. And that game, he and Carlisle went back and forth in the fourth quarter in overtime. It was the greatest basketball game I've ever seen, and my career was very young. There were people around me that I was talking with that had been covering the area for a lot longer who were like, I've never seen a basketball game this good. It was not particularly high scoring. I think it was like 60 or 71 to 69 or something like that. Like not crazy high scoring, but just especially in crunch time, it was shot made after shot made, big stop after, like every answer that, or every play that one team had, the other team answered on the other end. It was just such a, like you could not be on the edge of your seat more for that game. That one I remember the most.
Those are games that you kind of pinch yourself and say, I'm getting paid for doing this. Right?
Oh, I mean, yeah. Oh man.
The game that's I've covered a lot of great performances. I am going to focus on football here, even though I've covered great performances in pretty much every sport. But the thing that really sticks out for me, and I'm in football mode now because it's the high school football season. I go back to a game in 2012 when Forrest Barnes, a running back for Seneca Valley, in one game, he had 16 carries, 306 yards, and 7 touchdowns. At halftime, he had 9 carries, 278 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Seneca Valley won the game 64-14. Barnes was taken out of the game. He did not play after like the first drive of the second half. He scored a touchdown on the first drive of the second half. They pulled him. So literally he didn't play the last 20 minutes of the game. Still ends up with 306 yards, and here's the kicker. It came against my alma mater. at Next Tier Stadium down in Jackson Township against Connellsville. And I remember that game. It was literally like Forrest Barnes was running at full speed. Connellsville's defenders were like slow motion. That's literally what it looked like. It's crazy. I mean, 306 yards, 16 carries. Do the math.
19.2, I did.
I mean, that's literally like 2 first downs every time he touches the ball.
That's crazy.
That's nuts. But that's the one that stands out for me. Forrest Barnes, who ended up winning our scoring trophy that year, by the way. Great effort that season. Great effort that game by Forrest. All right, we'd like to thank our sponsors here. That those would include Butler County Chamber of Commerce, R.W. McDonald & Sons Incorporated, Robert Stevens Jewelers, and Sprankle's Neighborhood Market. We encourage you all to subscribe to the Butler Eagle YouTube channel and follow us on social media. And we appreciate you listening to the show. We'll be back next week. Goodbye.